First off, acknowledge co-author. So Amy Goodbrand is the PhD student that's doing most of the work that I'll talk about, and Ola Sillins is a collaborator, co-PI on a lot of this work. This is a professor at MPB. The general topic was sort of mountain pine beetle forest watersheds or forest watershed values in the foothills area. I'm going to get right into it. John said we have 5 to 15 minutes. I'm going to try and compress it a lot. We brought 2 posters, so a lot of this information, there's more detail in posters. What's that? 10 minutes? So anyway, I will show you some results and things, but there are good posters, so where Amy is at the back, find her and ask questions if you care. Most people don't care about forest hydrology. It's kind of like entomology. The only people that really care are entomologists. Forest hydrologists. So the general water balance as we kill trees, in this case we're killing trees with mountain pine beetle. They go from a red phase into a gray phase. Red phase, they're not transpiring anymore, but they have needles. So they behave like a tree up above. They're just not sucking water. As they go into the gray phase, the needles will fall off. They start to break down, and more light gets in. Ellen will talk about this, what it means from an ecology perspective, I would think, further on. And then sort of at the other end, remember here is we harvest or remove the whole tree and replant it or do something to it to get it to grow. So as I pointed out, what's happened, Ellen will hopefully talk about this a bit more. There's near Rob, there's a control, before-after control experiment looking at the ecological and hydrological response of simulated mountain pine beetle within a harvest control, 100% kill and a 50% kill. And I'll leave it at that for now. There's a poster, and Ellen will give you a bit more. Pictures of what's there. There's towers measuring all sorts of goody, nice things. And then we can look at what happened. So Amy Goodbrand is, back up a little bit, Aldous had a PhD student that really did the green and the red attack phase to characterize what was going on at a stand level. Following that, Amy started last summer and has re-instrumented these sites or brought them up to a capacity where we trust the data from the instruments that were already there. And she has analyzed some of the data from her last year's, comparing what the green, the red, and now the gray attack. And so one more field season will come. Again, a poster, if you're interested, or care, find you. The next big thing, and this is to preempt questions from, say, Brooks or Keith, so what? Essentially what that says is we have more water, more light, more energy at a stand scale. How does that affect maybe forest management guys that might care about something that's just got listed under Cowsawick or Sarah if you're further south? So that's sort of what I'll talk about in the next 4 minutes or so, quickly. When we take that information from the scan scale, we know there's more water at the site, it's at different times, the snow behaves different, and we try to bring that up to a watershed scale to say some management things about it. It becomes very complex, and that's sort of where the hydrologists come in, using all sorts of techniques and understanding of how the watershed works. The core of what we use is what's called a paired watershed experiment. So here's a little schematic that I borrowed from somewhere on the website when you Google paired watershed experiment. Essentially what you do is you measure at least 2 watersheds, sometimes more than 2. You measure them for a period of time, calibrate whatever parameter you're after, and then you treat one. And treat in our world usually means harvest of some type. Maybe you have 2 different treatments and 2 different controls, and then you compare those parameters after, so the change in those parameters. From a forest hydrology perspective, one of the big things that we're after is this mean annual peak flow change, which is what you would normally see now. This is actually a very low mean annual peak flow, or sort of, if you take your annual time series, that maximum peak that you have on a time series in that mean. And back when I was in the government, kind of full-time, I guess I'm still paid by the government full-time, I had an intern, and there was a paper published looking at this percent harvested for all these paired watershed studies in the last, say, 100 years. And you can plot the percent harvested area and the change in the mean. And if anybody's heard of this rule of thumb, around 30% of the area harvested of a watershed is where you start to see impacts. That's where this picks up. So in this tiny controlled area, if you harvest 30% or more, you might expect to see a change. The problem becomes it's kind of a shotgun blast. So what makes a watershed have no response or a lot of response. That's really where the trick comes in. And for, I don't know, 50, 80 years of forest hydrology, everything was really fun. The forester came to you and says, what should I do? Don't harvest more than 30% of your watershed in a short period of time, and then go back when it greens up and take more. And then things like mountain pine beetle or other constraints came around, and people started asking, what happens out here? And that's where we're at now. So I guess the question that came to my mind early on within this thing is, how many of these sites are actually in Alberta? It turns out that there was none. So then the first step that we did was, how many of these long-term sites do we have in Alberta? And it turns out we have lots. So this was actually, I was going to bring it, but it was just published in the Forestry Chronicles. So there's sort of a summary of all the sites in Alberta from old to new. Some of them are old, Tri-Creeks, Spring Creek. So Spring Creek is right here, and that's what we did yesterday rather than ride up on the bus with everybody, is we didn't know Spring Creek existed, it was June. So we went and looked at it to see what it was. It was a gold mine from a hydrology perspective. I sent my wife a text of a big tower and a water survey of Canada, and she wrote back, exciting, question mark. It is kind of, if you're a forest hydrologist, I guess, and you want to know what happens in the boreal when you harvest something. Anyway, so the one that we're going to talk about now is Ames, those Tri-Creeks. That's the one that's being funded through here, that has relevance for what's going on. It's representative in my mind of the foothills sort of natural region where there's a lot of pine and water behaves like it's supposed to, generally flows downhill. You get into the boreal plain, it's too flat for a hydrologist. So here's Tri-Creeks, classic paired catchment study. They logged one with buffers, one without buffers, and left one alone. What did we do with it? Well, what did Amy do with it? The we part. Amy re-instrumented it last summer as well, along with the Rob site, so we have flow data associated with it. And then the next step was, why don't we have that data point on that big 100 years of data? Well, what happened was it was the 1980s, there was budget cuts, things were cut back. So they wrote up what they could, but it never made it into the primary literature. It's sort of buried in gray literature. The data, a lot of those things, I don't know, anybody around in the 80s and how you kept data in the 80s? It wasn't in nice things that you just go on a computer and get at it. That's what it looks like. So we've taken a lot of effort to actually get it into a format. One of the quick and easy things was Water Survey of Canada, the national agency that does water monitoring, kept monitoring these sites until they pulled the road in the 90s. So we actually have a very good post-data set associated with it. And if you want to know what's in there, I'll allude to it later, you got to talk to Amy, or me, by the poster. The next step is, so we'll go back to this here. So the biologist, or the entomologist mentioned this, right? So I call it non-stationarity in the hydrology world. So what was is not what's going to happen in the future. Climate change, this PDO shifts, all these things really mess with our ability to predict what's going to happen in the future. This is a empirical relationship. It's one point. It relates to Tri-Creeks. So how do we take this information and expand it so that we can understand what might happen in the next watershed? It's this process science. So what causes this behavior is what we're after, so that we can figure out how another watershed might respond. Does that make sense to everybody? Same as mountain pine. It's a warm winter. What's going to happen? Well, it's outside of our empirical data set, so we have to rely on Kathy's information on what might happen with a warm winter, things like that. We use hydrologic modeling, and so in this case, this is not statistical, this is numerical modeling based on process information. And we'll go through this quickly because there's lots of information on it. Generally what we do, we take a watershed with really good data, in this case Tri-Creeks, we calibrate it so we have some confidence that it's working well, and then we force it with different types of scenarios, and in this case mountain pine beetle, so we can kind of figure out what's going on. And again, lots more information in the posters. So in summary, what we're actually trying to do as we work through this. So the first question is, what is the effect of the harvest at the stand scale? What is the effect of the harvest, of the historical harvest at Tri-Creek? So where is this data point? And I'm going to allude to it here. It's robust. So we're finding not only Tri-Creeks, but a lot of the ones on the eastern slopes. We can put a fairly severe disturbance on them where we would expect we would be up here somewhere, and they all plot down below. So this is the real teaser to go talk to Amy. If you want to know why, because this is where all the foresters kind of pipe up and go, oh, that means I can log the hell out, or the heck out of the foothills, and you're not gonna hurt the fish, right? Axel said so in Grand Prairie, whatever date it is, the 10th, 11th of May. Well, yes, but we need to know why, so that we can figure out whether or not that same behavior is gonna happen, or likely happen, and stand up in court if it ends up being a SARA-listed species, and the foresters do that part. So why is this robust? Talk to the poster. The relative disturbance, so that's what we talked about. So how is a harvest different than green attack, red attack versus a regrowing forest? And how does this behave at the standard watershed? And the last one that we're really gonna have to do a little bit more arm waving, because we can't actually measure it through time, but we can measure. How will these stands recover depending on how we treat them? So if we cut them down, replant them, if we underplant them, if we need, from a hydrologic perspective, some estimate of what will happen into the future. And that's where, of course, all sort of forestry type work becomes a little bit art, I guess, if you want to put it that way. So acknowledgments, and of course, acknowledging Amy, I stole a lot of her slides for this as it relates to the work here. Questions are later, I think.
Yeah. No, thanks a lot, Axel.